Well, welcome back. What we're going to be doing during this particular video is looking at how do I write a concern, a finding which is a concern. And as you're doing that, you always ask, where's the guidance? This is the structure that you'll see if you go into your Team Chair workbook. And we're going to use two folders, the 200 folder and the 300 folder. And within the 200 folder, if you're doing a general review or initial review, you're going to use C311 GI. And if you're doing an interim report or an interim visit, you're going to use C300I. In either case, you're also going to want to use C311, which is the CAC style guide, to make sure, and it's particularly important in the 3 videos that we have on findings. Concern, weakness, deficiency. This is the concern video, so you should definitely download it. The way I do it is create a folder, make some memorable name on that particular folder, and then copy these documents actually down out of your Team Chair workbook into the folder so that you can readily access it. I always try to have the accreditation policy and procedure manual there, and then the manual statement tool manual, which you can find up in AMS inside the tool itself. I download that and use that as well because it provides valuable feedback on what goes in each box as you're going along. Of those documents, the one you really need to pay attention to is C311, the style guide, because it's going to give you lots of really important information on verb selection. And the C300 GI guidance, especially as it relates to multi-factor findings, because it's going to give you the right format of how you structure that. All right, well, very good. Let's pull out what is a concern. So a concern indicates that it satisfies the criteria. However, the potential exists for the situation to change such that it may not be satisfied in the future. And if you look back, I'm using the data from 2022, from last year, you can see the distribution there of potential findings. So when you actually get all the way down to a final statement, a concern is the most common finding. Although it's in the running for a weakness, and then very few deficiencies exist at that point. All right, so where do we need to start in writing our concern? First, for all the findings, we're going to use a 3-statement format. The first part, state the criteria exactly, like in verbatim. State what the team observed, and then what is the impact on the program. As I alluded to earlier, you want to be very, very careful on your verb use here. Because again, the criteria for a finding, or for a concern, is the criteria is satisfied, but potential exists. And so let's look at C311 and the verb use. And you can see here either verb use or phrases that support a particular finding. And the one to the far right, the one on concern, while such and such exists, is currently satisfied, the potential exists, or changes could result, or expected increases in student, faculty, whatever, would impact the workload. Those are all good. Where you get into trouble is when you pick a verb or a phrase out of the deficiency or the weakness column and you use it to describe a concern, because then editor 1 and editor 2 get confused and they're going to return the statement back to you. So let me give you a good example. And again, I've color-coded it for you. The first thing we got to do is fully state the criteria. I have done that. That's the part in yellow. And then what was observed. Notice how rich this is in terms of describing what the team saw. And then the part that is in purple, that's going to be the final part, and that's describing what is the impact on the program. Okay, notice I use, in this particular case, potential exists. As you look at that, hopefully you're savoring. This is tasty, this is meaty, this is really well done in terms of describing all 3 of the various components. So having this tasty meal, let's now go to a bad example. And of course, not everything is pure evil. In this case, the team chair did a good job with the criterion. It's stated correctly. But notice the observation. First of all, they use the pronoun I. That's bad because C311 says don't use I, use team. in doing that, and then goes on to say, hey, course changes only occurred in 50% of the courses over the last 2 years. That's normal. It doesn't have to occur every single year. And so the rest of this finding is built on a platform of, well, nothingness. It's not really a finding, and so the impact is kind of muted. And then I would note, do you really want to use the verb retarded? Probably not. Probably editor 1 or editor 2 is going to suggest a different verb to get this, but they did use the potential exists. So again, bad example. There are parts of it that are well done, but ultimately this is just not a finding. I'm going to warn you now about the multi-factor pit of despair. And I cover this more extensively in the weakness and in deficiencies, how to write those, because they're much more common. They can exist for concerns. It's not impossible. It can exist for concerns. What you want to do is when you've got a single criteria and you've got multiple factors that are tied to different parts of that criteria, then it becomes a multi-factor finding. You want to go back to C200 GI or go look at the videos on weakness and deficiency, and you'll see how to write that. It does get a little bit confusing. It is covered in the documentation. Just got to pay attention to the details. Here's the actual structure for the pit of despair and for sorrow, but it doesn't look like it's that hard, but it is to actually write. And of course, your spider sense should generally fire when you're writing a concern, because at least for me, I haven't seen a multi-factor concern. I'm sure they exist, but they're kind of like unicorns, and you have to make the decision: am I that unique, talented, dashing team chair who's discovered a unicorn, or am I the savant idiot that's about to gain the ire of the editor 1 and editor 2? So again, if you found it, go look at the other videos and it will help you. So some key findings on this. First of all, use the 3-statement format. State the criteria exactly, state what the team observed, state the impact. When you're doing that, make sure that you have verb consistency with the verbs that suggest that the criteria is satisfied, but potential exists, or some variant of the potential exists. And again, C311 can be an invaluable guide, which I'm sure you downloaded based on this great video. All right, well, very good. That brings us to the end of how to write a concern for a draft statement, for interim visit or an interim report. Look forward to seeing you in the next video where we're going to talk about writing a weakness. See you then.